Well, we are in the season of gratitude, and that often it kind of takes over the whole month of November. Now, I hope that if that you have a regular practice of gratitude in your life, of practicing, kind of reflecting on what you are grateful for on a regular basis. It has a huge value for us, not only in our faith, but also they're starting to find out that our mental health, our emotional health, it is it's a great thing that gives us not only perspective at times, but also allows us to persevere because it reminds us of what we do have as opposed to looking at what we don't have at times. And as your pastor, I've been kind of reflecting actually the last month on what I've been grateful for, particularly in our community. And I started to make a list and have been sharing it with our leadership. But kind of thinking through this last year and what this community has in some ways accomplished, but more importantly, what God has done through us, what God has brought to us, as well as what we have accomplished with and through God. And in the last, kind of 11-ish months, kind of thinking through that, I wanted to just share that with you because I think it's good for us to pause and to reflect on those things. One, to celebrate, to give thanks to God, and to also allow us to say, where has God brought us from, as well as to determine where God will lead us to. And so thinking about, what I'm grateful for, one in particular has been just a youth ministry that has started this fall. We've had other opportunities for youth to be discipled in our church, and that changes over time. I used to be a youth minister. I'm not sure that I could do youth ministry again. I'm pretty sure I do love teenagers. I do, but I'm like, it's just different because culture changes. But Kevin has embraced this and has kind of taken this really humble heart with it. And I'm so grateful for, one, his leadership in that area, but also seeing what has come from that. And some of you have already started to pick up that our counter over here has been reflective of the art that is coming from our teenagers as they reflect in their faith. We have some very artistic teenagers in our midst, and that has just been a joy to witness and to see how they're using what is an artistic talent and a skill and a gift, and how that's being used in their faith. And so there's paintings over there's masks that were done not only with our teenagers, but as an invitation to our community to reflect on faith and the idea of masks that we wear in life. And so I invite you, during service or after service, to take a few moments and just appreciate what they've done and give thanks to the work that God is doing through that ministry right now. I give thanks to the workshops that we've held this fall, where 15 individuals at various points have come to not only have spiritual conversations, but learn spiritual practices that allow them to deepen their faith and their love for God and others. And that has been a joy to participate in it myself, and that I know that many of you, I've estimated we've probably had about 25 of you, if not more, dig into the book that we read as a complement to our sermon series. These are all faith steps that we take in our life, and they take a variety of forms, and I'm just highlighting a few that we have done collectively as a community. There's all sorts of other things that have been faith steps, maybe for you individually, but I wanted to highlight for you just to remind us of where we have been and what God has done, and to know God better, and to also allow that knowledge to draw us deeper into love for God and for others has been a beautiful thing to kind of pay witness to. And it's out of that outpouring of love that we have participated in events. We participated in an event called FutureCon, and it's a Comic-Con here that the mall is put on. And we use that as an opportunity to engage a greater community here in Licking County and just conversation and allowing people to experience church in a different way. And I give thanks for just that outreach and that event. And thinking also about those other ways that we have poured into our community, our greater community, trying to meet needs, collecting hygiene items for families in crisis, as well as now looking to sponsor children in foster care for Christmas, just providing them Christmas gifts and helping out the families that have taken them in to love them in this season, but also to let those children know that there's a greater world that is attentive to their needs. And I love that. I love that we are trying to pay attention to what are the needs in our community and how can we meet those needs. And that we have also taken, a step in sponsoring a new faith community. Powerline Ministries is meeting here once a month on Saturday evenings, and that is an opportunity for people to experience God in a new way, and that we have been a part of that just by opening our doors to them. And it's been wonderful to hear from them about their experience, one here, but also who is coming here because of them and because of our faithfulness and our willingness to share of what we do have. And I think, I touched on this, this is in addition to those everyday ways that we live our faith. And that's really kind of what church draws us in. How do we live our faith every day, not just on Sunday? How do we love our families, our friends, our coworkers, our neighbors? How do we even love strangers as a call in our lives? This is what church is. Not the building, but the people. And particularly how the people engage with God and with one another. And you all know this. You know that we are not a conventional church. We are not set up like a conventional church. We don't have a typical building. We don't really have stained glass. We don't have pews. We're set up like a coffee shop. You know this. You're experiencing this right now, and you've experienced this in the past. And you know that church isn't about the building, but you do know that space matters. And sometimes how people experience space and life. And that space can have an impact in good and bad ways. A few weeks ago, my husband and I had the opportunity to go see Hamilton at the Ohio Theater. And this was my husband's first experience with a professional performance. And I was very excited. I was that theater geek in high school. I participated in every opportunity all 4 years of high school to do theater. And I was so excited, but I also knew this was John's first experience, and I wanted it to be a good one, and I was nervous. I'm like, I hope he enjoys this. And that was kind of my thought walking in, and he had a great experience. We walked out, and he was like, I love this, I love this. It was really cool to see just how all the pieces and the parts work together. But there was a negative. If you've been to the Ohio Theater, have you sat in their seats? If you are above 5 foot, they are a tight fit. My husband is 6'2", and all leg. So he's a great sport, but throughout the entire performance, he kept shifting and moving to try and generate circulation through the entire body at different parts. And God love him. I mean, he's a great sport in it, but I just I'm so sorry, honey. Space matters. Sometimes literally the space that you are squeezed into can affect your experience. He's like, I might write a comment card and advise them to talk to AMC about their seating arrangements and explore that as an option. But, we know this. We know that all of this comes into play. How we as a community function and how we function in our spaces matters. And we have done, our part to pay attention to what works and what may work or what isn't working. And we have set ourselves up in this way at Church of the Mall to be a place where people can feel comfortable because we know that matters. It matters in our experience, and that when we are anxious or we're nervous, we don't always hear what's being said well. We don't always experience the environment to the best that it could be. And we've made changes throughout our history. We've been here 11 years. We've made some tweaks. This stage wasn't like this in the very beginning. We've made changes to our seating arrangements. We've made a lot of changes in the last couple years to accommodate some COVID protocols, and a lot of that has lingered since then because we knew we had to make this place comfortable for others. as well as we've adjusted for visual impact. We realize everything here has an opportunity to teach. And the church has recognized this throughout its history, not just Church in the Mall, but the historic church for thousands of years has known this, that sometimes you can use the space you're in to teach the story as well. We've had motifs here that work. All of you have, not all of you, but many of you told me that this bridge picture has an impact on your faith. And there's no explanation for it. It's just on the wall, but so many of you have looked at it and allowed it to engage your faith as you reflect on the picture itself. And it's just a picture we picked up at IKEA. It's nothing special, but it's allowed for special moments for you. We even changed things very dramatically in the last few years. We went online only for a season. And then we reopened, as I said, with some significant changes in order to make people comfortable again. We had to reimagine what that looked like because this world is very different now. And some of it has kind of resettled back in, and some of it isn't going back. And we have to recognize that and be realists in this. And so, kind of thinking about this and reimagining is part of our DNA. Reimagining how church is done in order to be church for those who might not set foot in a traditional church. We came out of a traditional church. There was nothing wrong with traditional church. It's just sometimes we recognize that those traditions may be off-putting to people. So how can we remove that barrier so that those who appreciate the traditions can embrace them, and those who may find them to be barriers can move past them? This year, I have set an alarm on my watch with the label, and you can see how dry my hands are in this picture. So this is me. But I have set this alarm on my watch to go off every weekday at 10 a.m. as a reminder, and it says read Acts 2. And it's really referring to Acts 2, 42 to 49. And it has been a reminder to me, and not every day do I open up my Bible and look at it or pull it up on my phone, but I know it so well that I know what I'm reminding myself of. And so allow me to read the passage for you today, because we're going to dig into this about what is church, and what is church to be, and how can we, in our day and age, reimagine church, not to be different or weird or cool, but to be invitational and welcoming to new generations. So allow me to read this for us. The believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teachings, to the community, to their shared meals, and to their prayers. A sense of awe came over everyone. God performed many wonders and signs through the apostles. All the believers were united and shared everything. They would sell pieces of property and possessions and distribute the proceeds to everyone who needed them. Every day they met together in the temple and ate in their homes. They shared food with gladness and simplicity. They praised God and demonstrated God's goodness to everyone. The Lord added daily to the community those who were being saved. The book of Acts gives us a history of the early church, of how the faith community took root after Jesus' resurrection. And this passage in particular describes what the community looks like and does. And the kind of the summary for this is actually found in verse 42 of that passage, where they devoted. When you think about what it is to devote, it means often there's an affection, but also a giving of attention, time, effort to something. So they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the community, to their shared meals, and to their prayers. This statement is almost a summary of all of that goes on in the passage from verses 42 to 49. And you think about, like, if you were to describe church to somebody, would it be this? Would you describe that we are a community that seeks to learn? And when they talk about the apostles' teaching, it is the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, as well as the Hebrew scriptures. You think about this new community and what they would have been teaching, and the apostles who walked with Jesus, what would they have been teaching on a regular basis? They would have emphasized the gospel, the good news, the resurrection, the life eternal, a life transformed because of Christ. And then the emphasis on community, of connecting and taking care of one another and taking care of the wider community as needed, of sharing meals together. And sometimes this, scholars lean into not only a shared meal, but the idea of communion, of remembering the Lord's Supper, the Last Supper, and prayers. And all of this can take a variety of forms. We came, as many of you know, we came up from a 200-year-old church, very traditional. And they realized that while they did all of this, that sometimes the form wasn't something that people could receive or experience in a way that was life-giving. More usually because of perceptions or maybe negative experiences they had in the past. And so they realized this, and they boldly embraced a vision of how could they reach new people who might be put off by the traditions of church or the formality of their style of worship. And they reimagined church for others. And what came from that was Church in the Mall. A reimagined church that still is devoted to the apostles' teachings, to community, to sharing and communion, to praying for one another and for others. But the form may look a little different, but the function is the same. And it's not simply what we do in community, but also in our very lives that comes out of this, allowing the Holy Spirit often to help us reimagine. We do this in our faith every day. We reimagine ourselves as made in the image of Christ, made in the image of God. How do we become more loving? How do we become more loving towards God? And how do we become more loving to others? That is a reimagining that happens with us, through us, and then is happening in community as well. And that allows us to display God, to display the love of Christ more fully in us to others. And it's part of our DNA as Church in the Mall and part of our DNA as Christians. We know that community is a need. And we know that as a human need, we need belonging, we need connection. And often in church we find that. We find that identity in Christ, and we also find connection in the community. And we have that to offer people. We have that to connect with people. The reality is that we live in a county where 60% of people do not have a church home. And couple that with the reality that loneliness is an issue, and the lack of community often contributes to a decline in our mental health, our mental well-being, our emotional stability at times, that having a church community can actually contribute to your overall emotional health in a positive way. These are good things. These are things that we have to offer the greater world, always. And we want Church in the Mall to be a place where people, yes, are introduced to Jesus, and that they are empowered to share the gospel in their everyday lives. Meaning that we live out our faith not simply on Sunday mornings, but live out our faith at work, whether you're in person or remote. You live out your faith if you're at the gym. You live out your faith on the soccer field or the basketball court as you're at your child's game. Sometimes that can be really hard. Have you seen some ugly parents? Yes, you have. And maybe you've been that parent who allows your excitement to get a little exuberant. Do we live out our faith in our neighborhoods, taking care of our neighbors, knowing their names, living out our faith in the halls of our schools, living out our faith even in the grocery store? We realize that we have opportunities every day to love God and love others. That we have the chance to introduce people to Jesus through our actions, our words, our care for them. our attention to them. So often I think we shy away from the idea of sharing our faith because we feel like we have to have either all the answers or we have to be able to convince people to believe. We're simply called to witness, meaning, what is your experience? What has been your experience in your faith? Not, how much do you know about the Bible? Or to put it a different way, I talk about my husband, John, a lot. I talk about him because he's important to me. He's somebody I spend a lot of time with. He's someone that I know, I enjoy being with. I share a lot about him because I love him and he loves me in turn. I talk about him so much that when people who haven't met him meet him, they feel like they know him. And the same can be true with our faith. The same can be true in the way that we talk about God, the way that we talk about Jesus. It doesn't have to be over the top or fake or unreal. It's simply talking about our lives and connecting our faith into it and how it matters, because we talk about the things that matter to us, right? We talk about our jobs, we talk about our family, we talk about our friends, we talk about even the shows and the media that we consume, because it's, in many ways, it's important to us because it's what we give our time to. So if our faith matters, if God matters, of course we're going to share that with others simply in sharing our lives. That's why we want to empower people in their everyday lives to share this, because it's such a part of them. And the church empowers us in that. It equips us, it connects us as a gathering of believers. Not the space. Yes, this is the place that we gather. This is the time, the day that we gather regularly, because consistency matters. It helps us. But church is always the gathering of believers, whether it's 2 people or 2,000. If they are centered on the apostles' teaching, focused on community and its care and encouragement and challenge to one another, if it's focused on sharing in connection through communion, sharing meals even, as we did this summer with Church in the Park and we'll be doing next Sunday with Deck the Halls, as well as being a community focused on prayer. I have watched you this week pray for one another for a variety of reasons. I have watched you invite people into prayer with you, and it is a beautiful thing, and it is a beautiful act of the church. Yes, we do these things on Sunday mornings in worship and in community. And we do this as a time to seek God, to know God, to grow in our love for God, that we preach the gospel, and we imagine how we will live it out in our everyday lives. And in that imagining, we embrace how we live out in a faith, and a faith that's shared. How we do that is how we treat people, talk to about them, face to face, and sometimes even what we do on social media. And then it's not about the cute Bible verse that you post. It's about what you put in the comments, y'all. You ever read the comments? I don't recommend it sometimes, because it's where you can see the darkness of humanity. Let us be light in all areas of life. How will we display kindness and compassion to everyone we encounter? See, in our everyday actions and words, we share Jesus. We represent Jesus and the church to the world, whether or not we think we do. People know it, and they look to us. And that can feel like a huge, enormous pressure, or it can simply be an invitation for us to be our authentic selves with folks. Sharing what matters to us. sharing with kindness, joy, love, peace, patience, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, that fruit of the Spirit that should be displayed in our lives as followers of Christ. We do this, yes, on Sunday, to reimagine our lives. Then how will we live it for the rest of the week? How will we share our faith throughout the week and how we live? And it's important to me that as a church, we are not simply engaged in busyness. I have no desire to fill your calendar with stuff, but I will invite you into opportunities to engage in practices and efforts that encourage and deepen your faith, that allow you to experience God in new and life-giving ways. And we've done that in our workshops as well as our discipleship of children and youth, as well as how we outreach into our community, caring for those in Licking County, as we've done through some blood drives, collecting hygiene items, as well as caring for foster children by sponsoring Christmas for them. This is the work of our church, and this is the work of the church. And we've embraced a phrase, I believe, that has always kind of recognized what we hope comes from this. That as we seek to be devoted to the apostles' teaching, to the community, to the shared meals, to the prayers, that as we seek to do this, that we create an environment where people not only hear but experience, welcome to Church of the Mall, welcome home. Welcome home has been a phrase I think that has resonated with many of you, that home is a place where we belong, where we feel safe. You've heard me say the word safe a couple times now because it's important. Because when we don't feel safe, it's really hard for us to hear the message of God. We're too anxious, we're too overwhelmed. But when people can relax and settle in, it's amazing what they'll respond to. Why we want this place to feel like home to others, not just simply ourselves. So my question to us as we kind of reflect on 2022, and we are looking to a new year, that we have an opportunity to continue to celebrate what God has done as well as anticipate what God will do through us. How will we imagine what welcome home means in 2023 and beyond? How will we welcome others into this home? How will we welcome others into relationship with Jesus so that they are empowered to share that faith in their everyday lives? I can tell you a few of the things that we're going to definitely continue to do, things that built into that consistency. We're going to continue the work of Sundays, of a time of worship focusing on the gospel, yes, and communion, and exploring how we live it in our lives. It's one piece. We're going to continue to care for one another in community and through prayer. And we're going to extend that care to others through a support of a variety of ministries and outreach options, as well as playing into what is already in our community that we can support through our efforts. Things like Powerline, caring for our neighbors by collecting, hygiene items, or caring for those who are struggling with homelessness through some of that connection as well. We're going to continue to offer workshops where we can have spiritual conversations and learn practices that empower a relationship with God and others. Church is the gathering of God's people. And in some of that, as we continue that work and we recognize that we've been through a lot of change in the last few years, and some of that has been reflected in what we do here as ministry. Some of those changes have been in response to things, and some of those things have been in anticipation of things. And part of that is also kind of reimagining our space, how we're organized a bit physically, As I mentioned, we made some major adjustments because of COVID. We moved, created a lot of social distancing. And it's probably time to reimagine again that allows people to, one, distance when they need to, but also to be closer and more connected in our worship. And then to do something with that open space. To not simply leave it open, but to create additional spaces where people can gather outside of Sunday morning worship. To connect in workshops or small groups. To circle up as opposed to table up as we do during worship. Because circles invite conversation and connection way more than looking at the back of someone's head. We're going to be approaching some of this change. Some of it will feel big. Some of it will just feel like who we are. And that's good. Because our faith should stretch us. But if you think about how we stretch, it's what we are is stretching. One, recognizing who we are right now, as well as anticipating who God will call us to be in the coming months and years. And yes, we're going to be making some tweaks to the space. We're going to be reorganizing the tables in a bit. We're going to be tweaking on some of them because some of them have become like teeter-totters. If you've experienced that one, you know it. Because how we gather together spatially matters, and to create that comfort level for people. Now, I want you to hear this as I talk about making some tweaks to our space, that too often in church, we kind of reverse how it should go. We think the people should support the building, rather than the building is a resource to support the work of the people. That is what we do here. Our building is a resource that supports our work, and we have work to do, my friends. And I'm inviting you into it. After Christmas, we're going to move the tables around. We're going to move the stage around. Things are still going to feel familiar, and things are going to feel different. We're due for a paint update. We're going to be painting these walls. We're going to have to do a few minor repairs. And as you know from your own home projects, there's always a little bit of project creep, and we're trying to hold that at bay. But we're going to need your help to move some stuff around. We're also going to need your help as we throw some paint on the walls and maybe do some minor repair projects, as well as anticipate what else we can do with this space to welcome people in. Getting creative about how we use this space on Sunday and beyond. Because it's not simply about Sunday morning, it's about our everyday lives. And I hope that we create designated spaces for small groups, for teens to gather, for our workshops, for others to simply sit in maybe a living room setting where they can talk and connect and linger and build relationships with one another. I know that many of you have found a chosen family here. How else can we offer that to other people? And sometimes that happens often through community and in the space that we offer them to do so. So I've listed out some needs, and you're going to hear more details in the coming weeks. And projects get messy, and we probably could use some help cleaning up after the fact, so there is a job for everyone in this. There'll be opportunities, and like I said, we're going to wait till after Christmas. We'll wait till after the holiday to dig into this, but it's going to come quick. And I want you to be praying about it. That is your work today. Because we want to ensure that our building, our space, is a resource that best supports the work of Church in the Mall. That as we head towards a new year, as we round out this year, I'm going to invite you to do this prayer. I want you to start by giving thanks for what God has done. And I want you to ask God to give us these things: unity, protection, joy, and to grow us in love for God and others. And then the third piece of this prayer is that you ask God to show you your part in this work. So give thanks for what God has done. Ask God to give us unity, protection, joy, and to grow us in love for God and others. And for God to show you what your part is in this. I believe if we pray this together, if we seek this, God will show up in ways that we imagine and ways we do not imagine. That is the beautiful thing of God. He works with us, through us, and sometimes in spite of us. So I ask that you continue to pray, attentive to how God will invite us to reimagine what Church in the Mall will look like in the coming years. Amen.